my name is Shirish Nadkarni. My talk is going to be about the art and science of achieving product market fit. Achieving product market fit is the single most important thing that a startup can do. Most startups fail because their product does not really meet the needs of the market or does not address a critical pain point. Let me quickly talk about my background. Jenna mentioned a little bit about my background. I'm an early veteran of Microsoft, joined Microsoft in 1987 when Microsoft was really known for MS-DOS, and then stayed on with Microsoft for more than a decade, launching MSN.com and doing the acquisition of Hotmail. Subsequently, I started two companies. One was Team-On Systems, which was acquired by BlackBerry, and then Limoca that Jenna mentioned, which was acquired by Rosetta Stone. I'm also a newly minted author. I've written a book called From Startup to Exit, which is an insider's guide to launching and scaling a tech business, and is designed to address the needs of aspiring entrepreneurs who want to understand what it takes to go from ideation to fundraising to developing a go-to-market strategy, and then finally finding an exit. So hopefully you will check it out. And many of the things that I talk about in my presentation are in my book. All right, so let's talk about what we mean by product market fit. The term product market fit was popularized by Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz, the founder of Netscape. According to Mark, product market fit means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy the market. Essentially, what it means is that you have found a really critical and deep pain point, and that you have built a solution that is far superior to others in the market that addresses that pain point. Achieving product market fit can take a long time. Let's take the example of Netflix. We all know about Netflix and how successful Netflix is today. However, initially when Netflix was launched, it took them literally 18 months to find product market fit. Originally, what they would do is they would distribute coupons with DVD players that would allow a user to rent for free 3 or 4 DVDs. And the expectation was that the user would then sign up with Netflix and rent additional DVDs. Unfortunately, that did not happen. And it was only when they came up with a model which had no due dates, no late fees, and a subscription that ultimately Netflix found product market fit. And literally, it happened in a few weeks. Whereas before they were struggling to get traffic, all of a sudden engagements soared, and the churn went down dramatically, and everything started working. And that was the foundation of Netflix as we know today. So what does product market fit look like? How do you know you have achieved product market fit? Well, I'll be frank and say that while there are metrics, and I'll go through that shortly, when you achieve product market fit, you will find that your salespeople are a lot more successful, your customers are returning your call, the press is writing about you, you're able to hire employees, etc., and the engine will really start churning in your favor. But there are specific metrics that you can track to really understand if you have achieved product market fit. So let's look at it from a consumer perspective and then from an enterprise perspective. So if you have a consumer product, what you will see is that you have usage almost every other day, so 3 out of 7 days. You will see organic growth of hundreds of signups a day and a path to 100,000 users within a few months. And that from a retention perspective, that 30 to 40% of users are active the day after sign up. So these are some metrics that you will see are really important to achieving product market fit.
Suresh, I apologize for cutting you off. Can we try resharing real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you stop your share and reshare as the whole window, like just the window for, wait, let's see. It's because he's screen. Okay, so share full screen
Okay.
and then put PowerPoint as full screen, and it should allow you to go into presentation mode. So let's see if that
It's
works.
gone into presentation mode now. Can you see it in presentation mode?
No, no, which is why if you stop the share in the actual platform,
Hmm.
and share again, but choose to share full screen.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. I'm choosing share. There's no option to select full screen.
What are your choices?
It just says, I've selected the PowerPoint slide
Okay.
and
At the top, there should be entire screen window and Chrome tab. Choose
yeah,
entire screen.
entire screen.
Yeah. And then let's,
Okay. And then
um,
select share.
mhm.
Okay.
And then make PowerPoint like expanded so it's full screen.
Okay. Now can you
And
see it?
then I will in a second. There we go. Okay. Now it's working.
Okay. Now I'm going to go to the next screen. Let me
Okay.
know. Um, were you able to see? It says SaaS products. Can you see that? What product market fit looks like for SaaS products?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Looks like it's working now.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenna.
No problem.
Okay. So we just spoke about what it means to achieve product market fit for consumer products. Let's look at it from a perspective of enterprise SaaS products. And here the metrics are somewhat different. Here, what you want to achieve is a conversion of 5% or 3 to 5% from free to paid. You want to see a ratio of LTV to CAC of 3 times. And what that means, LTV means lifetime value of the customer. So, what is the profitability for the lifetime of the customer? And CAC means customer acquisition cost. So, you want to see a ratio of 3 times. So, the lifetime value of the customer should be 3 times the customer acquisition cost. You want to see a monthly churn that is less than 2%, ideally more like 1% a month, and then a clear path to 100,000 monthly recurring revenue. So those are some of the metrics that you need to be tracking in order to understand whether you've achieved product market fit or not. All right. One metric that I did not include is user growth. User growth does not equal product market fit. And I'll give you the example of Branch Out, which launched in 2013, and they were trying to build a competitor to LinkedIn. And at that time, they were trying to build their network around the Facebook social graph. And they tried some tricks and they were able to achieve very significant user growth. But unfortunately, even after raising $50 million in funding, their engagement really did not happen. And very quickly, as you can see in this chart, their monthly active users declined precipitously, and the company had to pivot to a completely different offering. So be very careful about launching your product and expending a lot of marketing resources and money behind driving user growth before you have achieved product market fit. So let's talk about what it means to be successful with the idea from a strategic perspective, and then I'll talk about some of the tactics that you need to follow to achieve product market fit. So one of the lessons I learned when I was at Microsoft, this was in the MS-DOS days, is that incumbents are really very hard to displace. And at that time, some of the market leaders were Lotus 123 for spreadsheet, WordPerfect for word processing, and Borland DBase for database. and try as much as we did as Microsoft. We simply could not displace the incumbents. It was only when Microsoft launched Windows that we were able to displace the incumbents. And the reason was that, first of all, Microsoft developed spreadsheet, word processing, database apps as optimized for Windows, whereas Lotus and WordPerfect and Borland were slow to adopt Windows. They didn't want Windows to be successful, and they ported their applications, the DOS applications, to Windows, so it was not a very good experience. And so Microsoft was the first in the market with applications that were not only best of breed, but the best application on Windows. And slowly and surely, Microsoft started gaining market share on the existing incumbents. And then ultimately, Microsoft bundled Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access to create Microsoft Office, and that ultimately really was very, very successful, gaining close to 100% market share in the market. So the key thing I want to emphasize here is that what you want to watch out for is platform shifts or technology innovations that you can ride that can disrupt existing players in the market. And we've seen that time and time again. You've had the example of Amazon, which created a bookstore online. On the mobile front, you have a company called OfferUp, which is based out of Seattle, and they're a competitor to Craigslist. They made it very easy to sell your secondhand items on mobile devices. And then finally, you have the example of Snowflake, which is a data warehousing product that was optimized for the cloud and is now a very successful public company. So again, look for opportunities where there is a technology innovation or platform shift, and be the first to innovate on that platform, and you'll find it much easier to displace incumbents in the market. Another opportunity is when there are global macro trends. So in the case of Limoca, for example, which was a language learning product, we launched in 2007 when there was the convergence of globalization, the availability of broadband internet, and then social networks were taking off. We pioneered the notion of social language learning, where everyone was not only a student, but also a teacher. And we created a social network of language learners, and that became very, very successful, growing to 15 million members in 200 different countries before being acquired by Rosetta Stone. So look for, again, global macro trends that can allow your application to be successful because it's taking advantage of that global macro trend. So now let's talk about the road to product market fit and how you should go about doing that. A lot of times what I find is that you have technologists who come up with an idea, and they're so enamored with their idea, the technology, that they go ahead and launch their product only to find that they have not achieved product market fit. So what I recommend instead is really first spending the time to understand the customer problem. And I'll talk about how you go about doing that through customer interviews. But you need to have a very strong problem hypothesis. Once you understand the customer problem, then you can formulate the solution that addresses that problem. Make sure that your solution is riding some technology innovation or global macro trend, and is innovating from that perspective, and that your solution is 5 to 10 times better than your competition. Then you can engage in customer interviews to really make sure that your solution addresses the problem. And once you have confirmation, then you can build out an MVP and then track the metrics I discussed before in terms of engagement, retention, etc. and determine whether you're getting the type of engagement and retention that I talked about. And if you're getting that, then you can continue to iterate and add features. Or if you're not getting the engagement and retention that you would like, then you need to go back to the drawing board and understand from the customer point of view if you're really addressing their pain point. So before you actually build out your MVP, as I mentioned, you need to test the market. I would recommend doing at least 25 to 50 customer interviews. When you do the interview, make sure to not present the solution first. You need to first understand what their top 3 problems are, and understand how they're addressing those problems. What are some of the current solutions that they're using, and what kind of investment they've made in those solutions. And if the problem that you're addressing is not one of the top 3 or 4 problems, then you may want to reconsider what problems you're addressing, because if it's not a top of mind issue for your customer, then your sales cycles are going to be incredibly long, and you'll have a hard time getting their attention. So at that point, you may want to pivot right at that point to say to the customer, tell us more about your top 3 problems, and then figure out if there's a different solution that you need to build. The next thing that you may want to do is to actually build out a website that talks about your solution, and then use Google SCM or Facebook ads to drive customers to your website, and see if you can register them for your beta. This will give you a good understanding of your customer acquisition cost, and you can test different messages to see which message is resonating with your customers. And then once you have done that, then you can start building out prototypes to show to your customers to test out different product concepts. Here's an example of a test that a incubator called Pioneer Square Lab did with a concept called Xylo. And Xylo was a marketplace for musicians to provide training for students. And what they did was they created, as you can see, Instagram ads as well as Google, Facebook ads, and drove users to their website. And they understood from that process what the customer acquisition cost and what the potential revenue would be. And what they discovered was that the cost of acquisition was going to be almost $100,000, whereas the revenue that they would get was closer to $20,000. So they were obviously upside down, and they ultimately killed the idea. So they are a very well-known incubator in Seattle, and they literally test out hundreds of ideas before they decide which idea they want to incubate and then spin out of their lab. Let me now talk about what it means to build out an MVP. This is a really nice chart that explains how you should go about doing it. And what you want to do here is not build out a lot of functionality, but not focus on reliability, usability, etc. Rather, what you want to do is start off by building a few key features that really delight the user, and make sure that the product is usable, is reliable from the get-go. If you do that, then and you start getting customer traction, then you can start building out more features, while at the same time making sure that the product is usable and reliable and delightful to the customer. Let me now talk about some of the metrics that you need to track to make sure that you're achieving product market fit. Certainly, you should be tracking engagement. How often your customers are coming to your website and or mobile application. But the most important metric that you want to track is retention. And the way you do that is by tracking retention for your daily cohorts of users. So you track the same users over the lifetime of that user. And what you want to do is track their daily retention. And what you want to shoot for is what we call as the 40-20-10 rule, which means that if you have 100 users coming in on day zero, on day one, you want 40% or 40 users to come back. On day seven, 20 users to come back. And day 30, 10% coming back. And if you achieve that, then as you will see from this chart, you can be one of the top 5,000 apps on the App Store. If you are a top 10 app, then what you want to see is retention that is literally 50 to 60%, after 30 days and remaining flat from that point forward. So retention is something that is really very important to track and ensure that you're getting good retention of your users, because that will drive strong word of mouth, and the word of mouth will then drive more users to your website or mobile application. The other thing that you can do to understand how well you're doing in terms of achieving product market fit is to ask your users how you would feel if you could no longer use the product. If more than 40% say that they would be very disappointed, that's a good sign that you have achieved product market fit. If between 25 to 40% say that they're very disappointed, then you need to, you have not, achieved product market fit, and you need to reposition, retarget your product. And if it's less than 25%, then clearly you're far from achieving product market fit, and you need to potentially pivot at that point, keep your burn rate low so that you can continue to iterate with your product, or go back to your customer to really understand if you're addressing their critical pain points. Let me end by talking quickly about a case study of OfferUp, which I mentioned earlier. It's a Seattle-based startup that disrupted Craigslist by offering a mobile device that made it really super easy to share and sell your secondhand items. It's currently a top 50 app in the App Store. It's one of the few unicorns out of Seattle, and they've raised over $300 million in funding. The path to product market fit for OfferUp was not easy. They floundered for the first 2 years because they couldn't establish a critical mass of users. It's only when Facebook allowed ad targeting by zip code in 2013 that they were able to focus on the Seattle market and get users to download their mobile application. And they made it really super easy to take pictures of used items and then share that from that mobile device. And then they made it very easy for sellers and buyers to communicate with each other through in-app messaging. And the whole experience was substantially better than what Craigslist would offer. And once they did that, then they got critical mass in Seattle. Their retention, was very high, and they were then able to raise funding in the marketplace from well-known VCs, and then subsequently they expanded into other markets around the nation. The last thing I will say as I end my talk is that achieving product market fit is not sufficient. You need to also achieve product business model fit. In the case of Limoca, which I described earlier, we achieved product market fit quite spectacularly. but we struggled to monetize because we had a large international audience. And at that time, this was in the 2010 timeframe, people in countries like Brazil and India, where we had a lot of users, did not have credit cards. And so they were not able to pay for our courses. And so ultimately, we had to sell our company to Rosetta Stone. But subsequently, a company called Duolingo came out, and they built a mobile app, and they rode the penetration of the Apple App Store and the Google App Store, which allowed for credit card payments, and they were able to successfully monetize. And now they're a public company doing really well. Finally, there will be times when you do not achieve product market fit, and it's time to make a pivot. We're all familiar with Instagram and how successful the app has been for Facebook. But originally, when they launched, the app was known as Bourbon, and it was a location sharing app among lots of other location sharing apps, and they were not really very successful. But what they found was that people were sharing photos and applying filters through their app, and they decided to then simplify the app, quite significantly, and focus on photo sharing and filters. And that was a critical turning point for the company. And literally within weeks, they had 100,000 users, and they were featured as one of the featured apps on the Apple App Store. So hopefully this talk helps you understand the process of achieving product market fit, and what are the specific tactics you need to follow, what are some of the metrics you need to track in order to achieve product market fit. So at this point, I'm happy to address if there are any questions that you might have.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet. However, I'm sure we're going to see some over the next minute or two. Looks like we have a question from Anna Bagley. So she wants to know how to understand what your customer needs and how do you know if you've really achieved it? And I think you covered some of that, but do you want to go a little deeper?
Yeah, so first, really invest time in customer interviews, and focus first on understanding their pain points before discussing the potential solutions to those pain points. And then, as I mentioned earlier, once you launch your product, your MVP, then there are specific engagement and retention metrics that you need to track. So you need to track how often customers are coming to your site, what your retention looks like, what your churn is, etc. And those are some of the metrics that will help you understand whether you achieve product market fit or not.
Makes perfect sense. I have a question actually coming from me as a product person. I'm always worried in going to kind of those customer interviews, user interviews, that my feelings about the product or the direction that I think is the right direction to go, like my preconceived notions and biases, might bias the user that I'm talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions to prevent that bias happening?
Great question. Yeah, I think the way to do that is to hire, if you have the funding, to hire a professional moderator who can, you can build the questionnaire list with that person, but instead of you doing the interview and introducing, your bias, let somebody else do that who's a professional who can ask open-ended questions as opposed to leading the customer. And I think you'll find that to be a lot more useful approach.
It's a really good idea. It's
Mhm.
for your excitement about the product
Yeah.
to kind of get in the way of getting the real answer.
Mhm.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.